Good evening.
Hello, Dan. So nice to see you.
It's so nice to be here. I love this theater so much. This is a dream.
We love you.
Oh, thank you so much.
And the movie just opened yesterday, so
The movie opened yesterday, so I'm a husk of a person.
one day in, you're a husk.
Exactly.
That's all it takes.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you again for being here to talk about Good Grief. I wanted to start.
Turn that fucking phone off. You just turn that off. I'm kidding. Keep it on. Take the call. Take the call.
Yeah, not to make it like super serious from the outset, but
Sure.
I thought I'd start by asking about how you conceived of the idea for the film, because this was something that you were thinking about during the pandemic, and you experienced loss of your own that ended up making its way into the script.
Yeah. I lost my grandmother toward the end of the pandemic, as many of us have probably experienced someone who left us during that time. And I think the weight of the pandemic, the massive amounts of grief that we were just living through, in a way kind of eclipsed what was happening to me personally. And the feelings that I thought I would feel weren't coming in the way that I thought they would. And it brought about this question of is there a proper way to grieve? Am I doing it properly? Am I feeling enough? And I thought that was a really interesting conversation to explore in a movie. And I knew after Schitt's Creek that I wanted to make something about friendship, where friendship was at the core of the story. I think for so long I watched so many sort of films and television shows where both comedy and drama, the end goal was romance. And I think it was really important for me to tell a story where friendship was the big romance of the movie, and the actual romance was on the sidelines, and so often it's inverted. So it was the combination of wanting to explore that subject matter with this idea of overlaying it onto a love story about friendship, and it kind of played itself out that way.
Kind of to that point, there was a review of the movie that I read yesterday that pointed out that Good Grief sort of takes the gay best friend kind of character that's normally sidelined in a studio movie and really sort of foregrounds it here. So was that something too that you were aware of, this kind of subversion in that way?
I suppose. I mean, I think I've always been really fascinated by the friends in romantic comedies and dramas. They were always kind of interesting, but we never really know enough about them. They get a couple smart lines. I mean, I've played one. And they're great. They're a necessary part of the storytelling, but it was always this idea of what's their story? We never get to see the friendship side, because the friends are always facilitating the romance. And that's not my life, and that wasn't the story I wanted to tell. So I feel very grateful to have been given the opportunity to tell a story that I hope is relatable to so many people like myself, whose friendships are the great loves of their life. So yeah, I hope it connects in that way.
Often with multi-hyphenates who are starring in a movie that they're directing as well, that often can be, right, in service of the convenience of getting the movie made, because you bring a certain degree of star power to it. Did you always want to cast yourself as Mark? Did you have any trepidation about that, especially because this is a much more vulnerable kind of character than we...
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the roles weren't coming to me any other way. Because in this industry, you do one thing, and that's apparently all you can do. So I just had this curiosity to explore as an actor something that was very different from what I'd done, and I think I'm just naturally someone who's very reactive to the same. And I think doing 80 episodes of a comedy series that, granted, was very heartfelt, I had this kind of reactive desire to do something in the opposite direction, and do something dramatic that had elements of comedy as opposed to comedy with elements of drama. So once I wrote the script, I knew the story so clearly, and I knew how it looked, I knew how it felt, I knew how I wanted it to be told, and so the directing side of it was just an inevitability. I knew that, if I were to hire a director to do this, I would piss them off. Because you'd just be like hanging around, making suggestions that ultimately would leave you looking bad. So that was it, and then it was a part that I wasn't getting, and I hope that the more we get the opportunity to tell these stories, the more dynamic roles get offered to people who aren't front and center in this industry. So
that's very inspiring, like create the role that isn't being handed to you.
Yeah, it's like equal parts inspiring and frustrating.
Yeah. To that end, I was curious about some other aspects of the casting. You have a really great ensemble, and there's a couple specific ones I want to ask about. But so obviously we have Ruth Negga, Himesh Patel, of course Luke Evans. You have a casting director, Jessica Ronayne, thank you. And so obviously she's there to support you in that way, but how much of this was you really pushing in the direction of like these, did you have the vision board of the certain people that you...
No, I didn't write it with anyone in mind, which made the casting process even harder because I didn't know who I wanted. And so I relied on Jessica a lot to bring people to me, because we were also shooting it in England, and I wanted great British actors, and her suggestions were really interesting. And with Ruth and Himesh, their names were kind of, I guess they had been sent the script and they really responded to it. And I've been a fan of both of theirs for so many years, and I had just watched Station 11 when I heard that Himesh was interested, and I was very lucky that they came together and the chemistry was there, because it's really hard to tell a story about like an old lived-in friendship if you don't like the people that you're acting with. And so we built in like 2 weeks of rehearsal to really like the get to know you period, which I think was really important and helped a lot. And then, just fleshed out the movie with other incredible British actors, Celia Imrie, David Bradley. The French team it was a dream.
Yeah, well, one casting choice that I found very inspired was Arnaud Valois as Marc's possible new French love interest. This is a really interesting and like very gorgeous French actor, and that many of you may have seen. And there's like a movie, Beats Per Minute.
Yeah.
You've seen this, yeah.
Of course.
I don't know my question.
We could just
talk about him.
It was a really hard job, everybody. Really hard. I struggled with it. I struggled with the chemistry.
I struggled watching it.
Yeah. It was great. He's lovely, and it was great, and we had a lovely, great time.
I also love this Caitlin Dever moment at a funeral where she's sort of like using the dais to like stump her project and bemoan its possible doomed fate.
Yeah.
Is this, where did that idea come? I mean, have you been to like an LA funeral where you
Yes.
see this happen?
Yeah, I mean, to me that was real. Like wedding speeches, funerals, that's real. Someone inevitably makes things very uncomfortable for a lot of people. And so it's a tonal shift too. We let the audience off the hook a little bit in terms of the drama of it all by introducing a very real but silly character, and then snap them back into something completely, heartfelt with David Bradley's eulogy. But it was important to show the reality of these moments. And it seems at times kind of absurd, but that's how it actually is. So it was important for me to show the heartfelt moments and the serious moments, but also show those moments of truth where it's the darkest time in someone's life, and yet you can't help but laugh, or at least like get confused, like about how how these things happen, but they do, and those people find the mic. You know? I can't describe it, but they find the microphone. There was a 10-minute monologue that we had to cut down into that.
From Caitlin Dean.
Yes. Yeah. Extraordinary.
Also, another short appearance that I really enjoyed was from Emma Corrin as this sort of hack kind of artist that is probably like a trust fund or has some other kind of blind patron that is enabling their sort of crappy art.
Yeah.
And that to me was that was a very recognizable kind of I feel like I've been at that show before.
Yeah. It was important for me that every character in the movie be grieving something. You know, it was like this journey that Mark goes on. While it is inherently about friendship, it's also kind of a journey where he is experiencing grief all around him in various shades. And so, you know, with every character, I tried to sort of squeeze out in small moments, like the Emma character, it's like you have one impression of who they are, and then you realize that their parents have kind of been funding that, and that they're not happy, and that there's something kind of empty about it. And that, even in its smallness, was an important moment for Mark to take in. And I think the hope was at the end, after meeting all of these different characters, that he would be comforted in this idea that grief is not something that you experience by yourself, that it's ultimately kind of floating all around us in everyone we meet, just we don't see it that often.
In contrast to the Emma Corrin character, there is some very accomplished art in the movie by a Canadian artist named Chris Knight,
yeah.
who does the art that you see at Mark's gallery at the end of the film. I wasn't familiar with this Canadian artist. I looked him up. He does a lot of portraits of like very pretty twinks, sort of. Yeah. So what was your acquaintance? What was your relationship with?
Well, I own some of those twinks. I have them on my wall. He's an amazing artist, and one that I've followed for a really long time, and I think he's so specific. His style is really specific, and he has a DNA in his work that is so singular. And it felt important that if I was gonna base a film around, an art gallery at the end, you can't fuck up the art gallery. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do shitty art. And it was a bit of a struggle to convince people that investing in him was the way to go, because I think inherently, you look at a balance sheet and you think, well, do we need? And you do, because it says so much without me having to explain the character. And any time that I don't have to write expositional dialogue, great. So when he said yes, I just knew that there were going to be moments in this movie that were already locked in. I didn't have to worry about the ending working, because I knew his art would have that impact. That when we get to see these characters through the lens of Mark's sort of admiration, that the impact would be there, because that's what he does. He has this like unbelievable skill of seeing people through his paintings, and I'm very lucky that he said yes to doing it.
Did you add those prints to your collection of the twinks on your wall?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I have the art. I have the art, and I will likely be giving the art to the cast. Generous.
I guess I won't ask for one.
You can have one. Which one do you want? Ruth's? I'll pry it out of her
Yes.
hands.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How did you know?
She'll be thrilled about that.
Again, just touching on the craft of the movie a little bit, I wanted to know how intimately you were involved with the costuming. You have a costume designer, Julian Day, who worked on Rocket Man, Bohemian Rhapsody. This is very different than those. And like, I'm thinking, for example, of like this sort of baggy cable knit sweater that Mark has on a lot of the time. Like, I feel I could see you wearing that. Like, I felt like that was a
I don't
believable
know.
piece of costume.
It wasn't a stretch in terms of like costume for my character. Yeah, I think I love the process of building a world. I love the process of costuming and production design, and I was very hands-on with all of those departments. I mean, you hire incredible people, and then you essentially show up prepared to give them whatever information they need to do their jobs the best that they possibly could. So I knew that I wanted, I don't know, to me, these people, they worked in art, they were adjacent to art, there had to have been some kind of personal style, there had to have been something that they want to say through the way that they dress. So style was such an important part of the world building of the movie, and it was fun. We just tried on all of these things. I got a bunch of friends who work in fashion to give me their archive pieces, and we got to play around with some really exciting clothes, and Levy allowed us to shoot in the store, and it was just a fun thing. You know, I wanted the film to feel really sumptuous, and costume is such an important part of that. Costume and production design, you know, meeting Ula Berkland's lens was, you know, I wanted this to feel like a wonderful indulgence.
I'm also wondering, you know, this comes up, this probably comes up a lot for you in interviews and so forth, so I'm not trying to like lead you into a hot take or something, but you know, you were an out gay actor. So
Yeah.
Luke Evans is also an out gay actor.
Do you want me to out everyone in
Yes,
the movie?
yeah.
Okay.
Was that something that was important to you, or is it, you know, did it just sort of work out that way, or was that by design?
Of course,
for this role?
I just think you have to start there at the very least. You have to if you're writing a gay character, you have to put a gay actor in front of a casting director. Ultimately, the best person for the job will get the job because there's a story to tell. And that is the priority, because what ultimately succeeds in the storytelling is it's a gay story. And I mean, it's about a gay couple, and it's about my character's experience. So that needs to hit, and that's what's really gonna work. Ultimately, I will always start there, because it's important, at the very least, that those actors be put in front of casting directors and be seen. Because that's the problem too, is that actors aren't being seen. So it's the direct offers that I have a bit of a problem with. When an offer when there's a film that gets directly offered to a straight actor, and it's you know, you're like dying to play the part, sitting on the sidelines being like, okay, well, yeah, so no one got to see the casting director? Great. So it's important for me that those actors get put in front of the casting directors, because that's opportunity in and of itself. And yeah, Luke and, you know, and then with Himesh, he was the right person for the job. I couldn't picture anyone else. And he did such a beautiful job bringing that character to life. So it really comes down to just, you know, putting in the effort to get people seen, and then going from there.
Lastly, I wanted to ask you, you have a Hulu project that was ordered, a series called Standing By?
Yes.
Yes, and so I wondered where you are currently with that project, and then where do you see yourself like as, you know, you wear so many different hats. Is there one direction specifically that you feel like you want to go in, whether like director or actor? Do you kind of want to continue kind of this multi-hyphenate approach to story?
I don't know. I mean, I think I feel very lucky to have been to have the freedom to tell stories that I want to tell. I think for me, I don't consider myself a comic. I just like to tell stories, and that's the most important thing for me. So whether they're dramatic or whether they're comedic or whether they're somewhere in between, I want the freedom, and I hope I continue to get the opportunity to tell any kinds of stories I want to tell, because, you know, I don't know, I just think pigeonholing in this industry happens so often, and it's such a dangerous thing because there's so much potential in people, and sometimes we just get put in boxes, and that's where we stay. And yet there's so many people who have crossed boundaries in this industry who have really excelled, and I think the more we can give people those opportunities, the better. So I don't really know. I mean, I'd love to kind of, I'd love a thriller, that kind of feel, you know? Like, as much as no one wants to see me in a thriller, I do feel like I might be good at it. So, I don't know. I just feel very grateful, especially with Netflix and all of this, you know. I just came off of Schitt's Creek, and I'm like, I have this, like, a small, nuanced film about grief. That's not probably what they were expecting, and yet they believed in me enough to make the film, and that's a really important thing, I think. to have been given that green light.
Well, listen, thank you so much, Dan. It's been lovely listening to your candid words, and appreciate you all being here tonight. If everyone could just hang out in their seats while we make our exit, that would be much appreciated. And again, thanks so much, Dan.
Thank you so much for coming and watching. It means so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. That's it.